here on Radio Talking Book.
Thank you very much, Ryan, and welcome to our listeners. This is Jane Nielsen, Executive Director of Radio Talking Book Service, welcoming you this Friday to Community Conversations, our special live program that we do each week. And we have a very, very special guest with us today. I'm very pleased to welcome Carlos Servan. And I hope I'm saying that right?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. Carlos is with the Commission for the Blind. His office is in Lincoln. And many of our listeners, I'm sure, are very, very familiar with that organization. And so we're very pleased to have Carlos in the studio today. And Carlos, to have our listeners know a little bit about you, since they've welcomed us into their home, wherever they may be across the state or around the world, for that matter, on the internet. I'm going to turn it over to you and let you just tell the folks a little bit about yourself, where you are from, where you were raised, your education, your family, whatever you'd like to share, and then we'll talk more about the commission.
Thank you, Jane, and thanks everyone for listening wherever you are. Mm-hmm. I was born in Lima, Peru, South America. I grew up in Peru. We were 8 siblings. Well, we still are. Mm-hmm. I'm the 4th of 8. My dad was a policeman. My mom was a homemaker, but she will also make clothing and sell to neighbors or relatives. Mm. So I grew up also learning to work since I was younger. I have a very happy and normal childhood. Eventually, when I finished high school, I entered into what we call it the School of Detectives in Peru. It was a branch of the police. You had to go there for 4 years of training. When I was in my last year of training, a grenade exploded on my right hand, and that's how I lost my right hand and my eyesight. Mm-hmm. That was in 1989. I'm sorry, 1986. I'm getting confused the years here. Mm-hmm. 1986. Then I came to America for surgery, trying to get my sight back. Didn't work. Went back to Peru. Tried to get different type of alternatives, work, no success, no training, no services. So then I came back to America in 1989. That's where the 89 comes. Mm-hmm. For another surgery, and the doctors basically told me no luck after that. So I looked for some help, and the folks from the church took me to the National Federation of the Blind headquarters in Baltimore. They looked for sources around, and I ended in New Mexico. I think the idea was that because I didn't speak English in New Mexico, most people spoke Spanish, so they could help me. So I went to New Mexico, and if anybody is listening from New Mexico, you know that most people don't speak Spanish as they used to. So I had to learn English. I got training there in 89. In 1990, I started a college and also was hired by the Commission for the Blind for their transition program. In 1991, I became the coordinator of the transition program. And I worked there and went to school until 1998, when I came to Nebraska to be a deputy director for VOC Rehab Services. Last year, Dr. Van Sant retired after 35 or 36 years of hard work, and I became the executive director since August of last year. In New Mexico, I did my undergrad, and then also I have a master's degree in public administration, and I also went to law school in New Mexico. So that helped me to guess, balance my approach and view to the type of job I do. The public administration, to make sure that I do manage things the right way. The law, mainly the advocacy portion of it. My experience with the Commission for the Blind and eventually the National Federation of the Blind, my passion to serve blind people. So in a nutshell, Jane, that's me.
That is amazing. I did not know your personal story. And for me, it just seems amazing for someone that grew up sighted and then lost their vision. That must have been tragic to you at that age. And then to go on and get such a fabulous education and dedicate your life to the blind is so admirable. It's an inspiration. You must inspire people every day in your work.
Well, thank you. When I got training in New Mexico and also met my fellow friends from the National Federation of the Blind, one of the things that got in my head and I learned was blindness should not be a tragedy if proper training and opportunities given. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's tragic when you don't have the skills, mm-hmm. because my life changed completely. I was going to be an officer, a detective, and to be a detective and a police, you need to be in perfect physical conditions and above average, almost like an athlete. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, lose your right hand and become blind. Mm-hmm. And not being able to graduate, and then the girlfriend would leave you, and some friends are not friends anymore.
Sure.
You don't go to Paris like you used to, or mm-hmm. to different events. So yeah, it was tragic. Mm-hmm. But again, with proper training and opportunity, and part of the proper training is not just learning the alternative techniques, but also the right philosophy about life and blindness. So that helped me to have a normal life. Mm-hmm. I can still appreciate when the sun comes out. I don't have to see it. Mm-hmm. I know when it's warm. I know when it's out there, mm-hmm. because it's different. Mm-hmm. The birds are singing. I can smell the flowers, the freshness of things. So blindness will be a tragedy if there is not a proper approach to it. Mm-hmm. So I learned to have a normal life. And sometimes I meet people in the airport or meetings, and they tell me what you're just saying, that I might inspire others. I just see myself like a normal guy because I try to live a normal, productive life. Mm-hmm. But yeah, without noticing, I'm inspiring others, mm-hmm. because I was inspired also by others.
Sure.
I met other blind people when I came to America who were and are successful, have a normal, productive life, and I got inspired. So without realizing now, I think I do inspire others. I know folks who keep inspiring more people. And by the way, one of the most effective ways we provide services to blind people is by introducing them to other blind people.
Sure.
If some they want to do radio, we will introduce them to Ryan. Mm-hmm. Some want to do math, we will introduce them to math teachers, and so on. So that's what mm-hmm. I can tell you for mm-hmm. now. I can talk a lot about me, but
sure.
This is not about me, I guess.
Well, and in addition to that, not only were you dealing with the loss of your right arm, were you right-handed?
Yes.
Yes. I'm left-handed, so...
Oh, lucky you.
But, yeah, well, yeah. But I wouldn't be lucky like you. If I got hit with a grenade, chances are it would be my left hand that would be gone. Yeah. But that, and then you also had the language barrier that you mm-hmm. had to deal with and learn. Yeah. So that must have been difficult, too.
The culture,
yes.
Being away from your loved ones, mm-hmm.
Did you have, so you didn't have family here when you came to America?
Mm-hmm. No.
So that would be another challenge as well.
Yeah.
Did you struggle with depression and isolation for very long in the beginning, or because I know some people do more than others.
I guess I argue with my wife a lot because I tell her that I wasn't depressed, never.
Mm-hmm.
But then she's an occupational therapist, so she started asking me questions. Well, that kind of behavior, if you were angry sometimes and you were explosive, that's part of being depressed. Well, I never saw it that way.
No, you were just angry.
I was just angry because things were different.
Yes.
But in her way, I was depressed. No, I do accept I was... I became angry, but later on I learned that it was because there were not opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
My life was destroyed. Yeah,
Yes.
Anybody would be angry because of that.
And frustrated,
I'm
probably. A lot of frustration.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So then things changed because I started to do things.
Mm-hmm.
I started to get busy. So what I tell folks is, if you are busy, things change.
Mm-hmm.
If you are productive, things change. Yeah.
Yes. And challenged.
And challenged.
And you would have been challenged learning the language and learning to navigate in the world as a blind person.
Right. And also because of the training I got, I guess, as I told you, to be a detective, 4 years of training there, you only go home on the weekends. So it's a lot of discipline, a lot of hard work, control your temper and so forth. Mm-hmm. So that helped me a lot, I think, to adjust my blindness to a productive life.
Mm-hmm. When you went to college, then, did you have what kind of services were available then that maybe are different today for someone that would be looking to go to college as a blind student?
Well, back then, one of the first things I learned was that I have to be able to take my own notes. So I learned Braille. I was totally blind. I'm still totally blind. Mm-hmm. So not to use tape recorders, because then you had to go back and listen to the same boring lecture. Use readers, but you have to be able to be in control. The reader shouldn't tell you what he or she wants to read, because it's your class, it's your book, your assignments. You need to be in control and respectful also to the reader. But even though I learned those things, first things I did was I started recording the class, and I noticed that I didn't have enough time to go back and listen to the assignments and read the books. So I forced myself to take notes in Braille. And because I forced myself, I started to become very fast in Braille.
I'll bet.
Yeah, and I was able to do those things. The books were recorded. Back then it was called Recording for the Blind. Now I think it's called RFB&D. They added and dyslexic. But these days the difference is, I guess, the technology, the computers, the assignments many times are sent via email. I see that on my kids. Readers, you don't use as many readers as you used to, because the authors provide, well, not all of them, but many of them provide digitalized books, so you can listen to them in the computer. And many of them also like to scan their own books and are able to read it that way. So technology has changed those things. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now tell us, so you started working at the commission in New Mexico?
In New Mexico, yeah, back in 1990.
Okay. And what did you do there?
I was a teacher, K-12 instructor, mainly working with youth. Yep.
Okay. And then how did you end up in Nebraska?
Well, I got a job offer. I think Dr. Van Zandt became director officially she became director April 1st, 1989. So in May, I got a call from her asking me if I would be interested to be a deputy director in Nebraska.
Oh.
And I was looking for a job But then I had a job, but it was time for me for a new challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So I welcomed that challenge and moved to Nebraska.
Most people would think you were crazy moving from New Mexico to Nebraska because of our winters.
Yeah, I had no idea about the weather. I grew up in Lima, Peru, where the coldest winter is 56 degrees at night. The coldest winter usually is low 60s, and the hottest summer is high 80s. So then I went to New Mexico. It gets hot there,
Yes.
and during the winter, to me, it was very cold. But I saw folks from the Midwest going for vacation to New Mexico in the winter, and I didn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I came to Nebraska, I understood why.
And did you move here in the summer then?
Yes.
So then that
Yep.
first winter.
End of July.
So what was your reaction to the first winter you were here?
Well, actually, it was fall, and I thought it was already winter. And then when it was very, very cold, people were laughing at me. I couldn't believe it. So I learned to buy extra layers.
Long underwear.
Yep, long underwear. Get I call it the astronaut pants. I put it on top of my pants.
Oh, sure.
And then
Like ski pants.
Yep, ski
Yes.
pants. Yeah, I get those. Ski mask, and then another hat on top of that. So, yep, I'm in Nebraska now,
Okay.
except my accent.
Yes, yes. Do you have any other family here besides your wife and children? Any of your siblings here?
Not in Nebraska, but my mom lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. One sister there too.
Oh.
And then a brother and a sister, and two sisters in Texas.
Oh, okay. So you have some siblings and extended
No,
family.
yes.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, that's awesome.
During the holidays, they want me to go there. They don't want to come here because it's too cold.
Exactly.
I don't blame them.
Yes. I have a son that lives in Yuma, Arizona, and he has not been home for Christmas since 1997 when he graduated from high school and went into the Navy. And he keeps talking about coming home for Christmas. And then, like this last winter, I'll text him and say, well, it's 5 below today, and and he goes, oh, man, maybe I don't want to come. I said, no, it's... And it's hard. You're housebound. In the summer you can sit out in the garage and sit in the yard, and it's just not as much fun, especially if you're cold. But
Yeah.
So you started out at the Commission for the Blind as the deputy director then.
Yes,
Okay.
back in 98.
Uh-huh. So tell me about, and our listeners, what that job entails or entailed at the time, and I'm sure it's changed over the years as well.
Yeah, it changed over the years because back then it was deputy director for vocational rehabilitation services, meaning just supervise everything dealing with services which will encompass eventually get jobs. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
But then the transition services was added. Then eventually the Nebraska Business Enterprises program. Then the last few years, the center training, and then also the independent living and older blind program, as well as technology. So when I accepted the job as executive director, I was supervising all field services. Yeah. Well, no field, actually everything regarding services.
Sure. How long has the commission always done independent living and the training? Has that always been a part of the programs there?
Yes. People can define independent living in different ways because when under vocational rehabilitation, if the goal is to have a job, you need to be independent first, meaning you need to be able to live independently.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can focus on going to school or learning how to get a job and eventually work. So in that regard, we do that all the time. Then because we have those expertise, we also provide some independent living services to those who don't have a vocational goal. They are not looking for a job.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them are folks who maybe they want to be homemakers, but maybe who became blind at later age, and they want to be retired, but they want to be independent.
Oh, sure.
So we provide services to them. We always have that. In fact, in the past, we used to do more, but we were told by the federal government that the money that we got, the funds, 90% is supposed to be for vocational rehabilitation and 10% for independent living and older blind. So we are limited to spend only 10% of our time and efforts to folks who are older blind. Now we are working with the American Council of the Blind and the National Federation of the Blind to see if we can get more funds from the state, because the federal government's intent was to provide a little money to each state to prove that those services are needed, but not that they will provide more funds. Because state directors keep telling the federal government, listen, 50% or more of the blind population are senior blind. They need to give funds. Well, the federal government is telling the agencies, well, the intent was never to give you money for all the blind. The intent was for you to prove that that works, and now the state government has to provide that. So that's what they're telling us. They're just basically saying we are not going to give you money. And that's also Congress. So we are working at the local level. Nebraska and Minnesota are the two states that got some extra funds. In Nebraska, we got $150,000 more, so we are able to provide a little more services than other states. But it's not enough, so we are going to continue working on that. Unfortunately, due to the recession or economic situation in Nebraska, the agencies are not getting any increases. On the contrary, they are cutting the budget.
Yes, they are, because of the economic situation that they're in. Yeah. That is very, very interesting. And so many of our listeners are elderly, and so in their situation, they've lost their vision maybe due to diabetes or macular degeneration, so they're older. And so it is much more difficult for them to adjust and learn new ways of doing things. So it is very difficult. And if there aren't funding sources or people out there to be able to train them, that is a real problem.
It is. Like I'm saying before, we were providing a lot of services to them. What I tell people is, I have children. I also have my mom. If my kids become blind, I want them to get good services.
Yes.
And if my mom becomes blind, I also want her to get good services. Not only that, but she pays her taxes, and there are no services for her.
Yeah.
So, well, that's what I think, but now we need to persuade the legislators about that.
Yes.
But what I want to mention is, yes, it's harder for folks at later age to get training and so forth, but it's much more harder if you just think that your life is over, that your independence is over. If you know that you can get some techniques, and most techniques are easy to learn. In fact, what I tell folks is the technique to use a cane, you're learning in 5 minutes. What really takes is just time and confidence. That's it. You need to know that you can be independent, meet other people, try to do things, don't limit yourself. There are safe ways to teach. Yes, we are limited, but we still visit. We still carry like 600 to 800 cases each year for senior blind. We visit them at least 6 times per during that time, and provide some good tips for that. The other portion too is many people retire too early just because they are losing their vision. And if you are still on working age. In other words, if you had your sight, will you retire? And if the answer is not, we can open your case as vocational rehabilitation, provide all the services, and help you to find a job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And many of the employers don't realize that there are tools out there that they can have, that they can provide for employees that need a little of assistance to still do their job. And so it's educating the employers as well.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that I learned as a blind person, but also we teach our clients, is that in order to be successful as a blind person, you need to master the skills of blindness. Mm-hmm. But more than that, you need to learn how to deal with people's misconceptions about the blind, or society misconception. Well, the blind are part of that society. We ourselves many times don't believe we could do things. Mm. Employers are part of that.
That's true.
My parents are part of that. My mom didn't think I could be independent. She was willing to give the rest of her life to help me.
Yes.
And now that I'm a parent, I can understand that. But I also know that as a parent, she wanted me to be independent. Mm-hmm. And now she's glad I have a normal life.
Yes.
So going back to the employers are part of society. And most of them are business people, and they want productivity.
Yes.
So if you are going to tell them, here is a blind guy, can you give them a job? Well, they are going to say no, because how are they going to be productive? So it takes time to build partnership, to train them, to provide them the education, to bring them for a tour. We do OJTs, which it's on-the-job training. So blind people working with certain employer, we pay for the wages, we pay for the insurance. All we're asking the employer is to give them a chance, and if there is a good match, the employer decides to hire. They don't have to hire though. But if they see that the person is productive, why not?
Yes, that's a great philosophy to have. That means the employer can take the risk of being involved in the program, and then I bet the percentage is very high of those folks that are successful.
Yes, and what I want to mention too is sometimes employers don't have a good experience with our candidates, but I'm an employer. And how many employers don't have good experience with any candidate?
Exactly.
Sometimes we hire the wrong person.
Yes, trial and error.
Exactly, and that's normal. And the same thing happens with blind people. Blind people are people, and it's maybe not just a good match. Maybe the person wasn't excited about that job, so we just look for something else.
Right.
But the employer, number one, doesn't have to feel obligated to hire our candidates, doesn't have to feel bad if he or she doesn't hire our candidates. But also we want that person not to judge all blind people just because it didn't work one time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's very good. I visited with some HR people too around that same subject, and the Vision Resource Coalition that I'm a part of, and I believe Nancy Floral is a part of that. We meet quarterly, and that comes up quite often. And so having a group of peers to talk about it and find different solutions or suggest different opportunities and different solutions is very helpful to the whole group. But some of the HR people that I've talked to have said, they had no clue that there were things out there that could help the employee.
That's right. Yeah.
And people that didn't work with anyone that was disabled in any way in the employment arena. They're very surprised, and then they become wonderful advocates then as well, and help spread the word to other employers.
Correct.
Yeah. It's similar to my parents owned a business, and it was in a small town, and the high school had a program for seniors where they could go to school half a day and then go out into the business world and work for half a day. And the same thing, they may not work out in that particular field. They may think they like it and find they don't. And so it's similar to that in letting somebody get the training they need and try a position, and then if it works out for both of them, you have a potential employee.
That's right.
In that situation. Well, tell me, Carlos, a little bit about the process for people to get, if they come to the commission, they're blind or they have a member of their family that's blind and they want to seek services. How do they go about that?
Okay, first of all, they need to contact us. They can call the main office in Lincoln, which is 402-471-2891, or the 800 number, which I think you have it.
I have the 877-809-2419.
Yeah, they can call either of those two numbers and express interest on getting training or tips about blindness.
Mm-hmm.
So then we send a counselor who will assess the person, and we always try to open them on vocational rehabilitation services. Let's talk about the VR process first. So once the person is interested and they say yes, then we fill out an application, which is a federal form, a lot of confidential questions there. After that, the person becomes eligible if is legally blind or functionally blind, and also wants to work. Because the person can be blind, but if the person doesn't want to work, then we don't provide services. But sometimes people want to work and they're just blind in one eye. They have to be blind or functionally blind on both eyes.
What does functionally blind mean?
Well, some folks, legally blind is 20/200, or also the perispheric limitation of 20 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
That's a legally blind. Functionally blind, it's sometimes they have better than 20/200, better vision than that, but they cannot see well at night, or when there is no sunlight, or depth perception, or sensitive to the light. So that's functionally blind because they are functioning as a blind person, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So we provide training. They can qualify for services. So then we make them eligible, and then we need to write a plan with the client. And the plan is individualized. The name of the document is Individualized Plan for Employment, because again, has to be for employment. And there is a number of services, and one of them is technology, education. We can pay for college, we can pay for books. We provide equipment, adaptive equipment, as well as a computer. But we just don't buy those things. The person needs to excuse me. The person needs to get training first and be able to use that equipment successfully. So we invest time and resources on making sure that the person can get that training. So once the person gets the training and the tools, either go to more training like college or start looking for a job. We also help them to find jobs. That's placement services. We have also something called the Nebraska Business Enterprises, which is derived from a federal law called Randolph-Shepard program, where blind people have priority to run vending machines and cafeterias on federal buildings. In Nebraska, the state law also expands that to state buildings. And we are also expanding that to the private sector. So if people want to be entrepreneurs, we can provide that services there.
I knew about that program. I didn't know they were rolling it out to the private sector. That could be very successful.
Yes. So we are doing that.
Is that across the country or just in Nebraska?
For the federal buildings, it's across the country.
Okay.
And then some states also have for the state buildings, but not that many have the private sector.
Okay.
Yeah.
have a follow-up question about the functioning blind, functionally blind. I'm thinking of my son's situation. So that the 20/200 is the central vision correction, right? Or looking through the central vision?
20/200 is just distance.
Oh, distance. Okay.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they may have trouble with their central vision.
And that's 20 degrees.
Oh, okay.
Either central or hemispheric, yeah.
Okay. All right. I knew there was a correlation
so
there.
That's legally blind. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
And it has to be with best correction. So some people are legally blind without glasses, but if they get glasses and they can see better, that's not legally blind.
Sure. Yes, I understand that. But that's a good thing to clarify with our listeners that, of course, if they're have low vision is low vision the same as visually impaired? Are those terms interchangeable?
Yeah, in general, yes. For us, at least for me and many folks, to us, a blind person is a person who needs to use alternative techniques to function independently. So if there are some folks with what they call it low vision or visually impaired, and they need our services, it's because they cannot function normal with their vision.
I see.
So I just call it blind. But yeah, in general, low vision, visually impaired can be exchanged. Yeah.
Okay, good. I didn't know. I've used both, and I kind of assumed that, but I didn't know for sure.
Yeah, one of the other things that people don't want to use the word blind because many times to them it means, I don't want to be called blind because that means that I'm a less of a person. Well, why? Blind is just a term, and what we are doing is changing what it means to be blind. For instance, the name of this entity is Radio Talking Book and services, right?
Yes, Radio Talking Book Services, and then our radio station part is Radio Talking Book Network.
Network, okay. But that means that it's a radio station? No, right?
Right, exactly.
So it's just different terms, I guess.
We are kind of a radio station, but we don't play rock and roll.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do a short interludes between programs or whatever. But yes, that is. And you think about how terms in other, I think of special ed and retardation, they change the terms. It still means the same thing. And unfortunately, changing the term doesn't change the condition. And sometimes the terms take on a negative connotation, and they change the term, but then it doesn't really, I don't know that it changes anything.
Oh, it doesn't make things better, yeah?
No.
Yeah, because as long as I'm going to get training, if I have some useful vision and qualify for services, well, I need training, regardless.
Yes.
Some kind of thing, yeah.
I need training on how to be a better escort. When I practice on Ryan all the time. He's very good to let me practice, and then I get flustered when I meet a new person and forget everything I've learned. So, tell me some of the training options folks have at the Commission. What kind of things can you help them with as far as training?
I talk about the vocational rehabilitation portion, and as you ask this question, can I talk about the independent living services?
Yes, you can talk about both.
Yes. So the type of training we provide is, in Lincoln we have our Nebraska Center for the Blind, which is a training center. People could come there from 8 to 5. It's a residential center, usually from 6 to 9 months. It's intensive. People who don't live in Lincoln many times have to travel and stay and miss their family, but it's an investment, and that's the one that we recommend the most because after 6 to 9 months training, nobody can stop you. At least that happens to me and to a lot of people who I know. But if that's not for you an option, you don't want to, we provide also field services across the state. We have office in Scottsbluff, North Platte, Kearney, Norfolk, Omaha, and Lincoln. But we travel anywhere in the state. In the field services in the state, we go there, and also our counselors doing assessment, both to the person in the house, but also to the house, because then many times simple tips will help a person to be independent. For instance, how to mark the thermostat, how to mark the microwave, some techniques on how to cook so you wouldn't burn yourself. Because many times, just because you don't see well enough, you think that your life is over. And no, you know how to cook, you know how to operate equipment. It's just you don't see it where the numbers are, maybe, or where the little line is. So we help you to mark those, and then you just use the experience you have in all your life. Life is not over. So we do that a lot at home. Now, I also want people to remember that most blind people have some vision. And the majority are also over 60, 65. And don't think that because you are over 60, 65, life is over, because, again, most of them are in that category. We work with them, and many of them go back to work, or instead of going to a nursing home, they go back home and keep their home and keep living an independent life.
You talked earlier, Carlos, about the majority of your funds and time must be spent on vocational rehabilitation. For the seniors that are out there that are 60 or 65, and if they want to go to work, they can take advantage of those services. If they can afford to retire and they're okay with retiring, can they still take advantage of some of those field services?
Yes, because I mentioned that still 10% of our resources and budget can be used for that population.
Okay, and you are able to take care of the folks that call you. You don't have you don't have to turn people away yet.
We haven't. What we did is reduce the number of visits from 9 to 6.
I see.
And many times in 6 visits, I shouldn't say it's enough, but it's way better than the person was in the beginning.
Okay. On those visits, you talked about cane travel only taking like 5 minutes to learn. I thought it would take a lot longer. I'm sure a lot of it is practice as well, which would be outside the 5 minutes. But do you touch on, is that one of the skills that they might learn as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, some use of the cane, but then they will have to come to programs because, like I said, takes practice. People need to gain confidence, and you don't get that. You don't gain that in 5 minutes.
No,
or even 6 visits.
Yes. You have to be willing to jump off the cliff and take the risk of learning how and then practicing it. It would be, I could see where it'd be very intimidating. My son doesn't use a cane, and I have tried to talk him into using a cane. Like I'll drop him off at a grocery store, and he'll walk across the parking lot and into the store, and he can't always see any traffic, and he just says, well, they'll see me walking, and I'm going, oh my goodness, don't use the cane for yourself, use it for the people that, to protect yourself, to protect me and other people from, he's kind of crazy sometimes. Youth, you know how youth is.
I know a lot of folks like that. My mom used to tell me, don't use your cane, you can walk with me. Well, in my case, I'd rather walk with my cane than with my mom. I
understand that. That makes perfect sense because I've watched you, I've watched Ryan, I've seen several people do that, and there is such a sense of confidence when you walk with your cane. You know what it does, you know what it tells you, you can feel it, you can hear it. It does make sense because a sighted person walking is getting different cues, and I do it all the time when I'm trying to help somebody. I forget to tell them there's a curb, or I turn left and they're left standing there. So I can see where it would make you feel much more comfortable.
Right. I remember when I was running a transition program in New Mexico, when I talked to some young folks here too, they don't want to use canes because they want to be cool.
Yeah.
I say, well, yeah, but I try not to use a cane because after my first surgery, I had some vision back. I could see some colors, some shadows. Well, people thought I was in drugs or I was weird because I keep moving my head to see better from one side. I keep checking around. I didn't look that I was walking normal. So people just look at you like, what's wrong with this guy?
Yeah.
So what is more cool? Just walk with your cane with pride and confidence,
Yes.
or look like you're in drugs or weird. And
Yeah.
it just makes a big difference. So I walk with my cane wherever I go and just feel more confidence. If I don't have a cane, I feel weird.
Yeah. I would feel lost, I would think.
Correct.
Lost. What's the word I'm thinking of?
Confused.
Confused. There's another word I'm thinking
Insecure.
of. It's not coming to me. But oh well, it probably will as I talk later. I was impressed with the training that is available at the center there in Lincoln. I was especially impressed with the workshop where they could learn to use tools and build things. That's amazing to me too.
Yeah, and goes back to if you grew up doing things already, you already know how to do those things. And people say, yeah, but I can cut my hand or do different things. Well, sighted people do that too if they are not careful. In fact, we haven't had anybody who had an accident with those tools because they use the techniques. So it's just when you look at the things, or if you never open a carport and look at an engine, you might think, oh, it's going to burn me, it's going to explode. At least that's what I thought the first time. But if you are used to those things, it's normal.
Yes.
So that's why it's also important for a person to get training for 6 to 9 months. It's the workshop, it's the kitchen. We use 2 different kitchens with electricity and gas. We also do grilling with charcoal. I'm sorry. Cane travel. They go to different places. It's gradual. We don't tell them to start walking 20 blocks the first day. It's gradual. Building confidence upon each of the accomplishments. That's what we try to do.
We have about 10 minutes left in the hour. Carlos, what areas would you like to share with our listeners that we haven't touched on or that I haven't thought to ask about?
Well, we talk about the center. We talk a bit about the Business Enterprises Program. I think just in general, rather than trying to talk about an area, because there is a myth out there that saying that if I get the right adaptive technology, I can do anything. And that's not right either, because it's like giving a hammer and a saw to anybody and expecting that person will be a carpenter. It doesn't work that way. You need to learn to use the tools. You need to put hard work on it. And that's how technology is. Not just because you get an iPhone, it work for you. You need to learn to do it. And it's fun. If you really want to do it, it's fun. I'm not trying to have people walk away from technology. On the contrary, what I'm trying to say is take advantage. The technology is out there, but don't get intimidated because it's hard in the beginning. It's going to be hard, but you can learn it, no matter how old you are. My mom is almost 80, and she just opened her Facebook. She's now my friend on Facebook. So she's having fun looking at pictures from her grandkids and this and that. And then you might say, well, yeah, why do I want to get to Facebook if I'm blind? Well, I'm blind. And I get in touch with friends across the world that way too.
that's something I've learned as well. I see Ryan's on Facebook. My son is not on Facebook, but I am. And my children and grandchildren live all over the country, so I can't see them very often, so I do see that on Facebook. And some of the friends of my sons that are on Facebook have reached out to me, and I'm friends with them. So I see how they use Facebook as well. And it's fun to see them express themselves or talk about their hobbies or things that the one person I'm thinking of is a young lady, and she has a cat, and she'll post funny things about her cat, things that the cat is doing. And it expands my horizons, learning how they see things and how they are exposed to things and how they're sharing it with their friends and family. So it's good for both parties, I think.
Yes. One time I got a document when I was away in a hotel, and I didn't have a reader with me. I didn't have my scanner. So I called my sister, and we did the video with a FaceTime, or you could do it on WhatsApp too. And I pointed her with the phone where the document was, and she read it for me.
Oh, wow.
But I didn't need to read the whole thing, just
some of it.
Some of the part, and I never thought about that, but more and more people are doing that. Now, you might say that I'm contradicting myself because I'm talking about how great technology is, but for us to be independent, really, especially those who think their life is over, most of the things doesn't have to take a high tech. Just a cane, just mark few things, and use your imagination to do things in a different way. Because you already know how to tie your shoes, you know how to cook, you just need to learn a different way to do it. So that's what I wanted to emphasize too.
Well, and in that case that you just shared about reading the document, you used your intuition to figure out a way to read that document too. So that goes back to exactly what you were saying about not relying on the technology. So your intuition had nothing to do with the technology. You thought of that. You thought, I have a problem to solve. How am I going to solve this solution? Then you used the technology.
Right. And that part wasn't adaptive equipment. It was just a regular thing that a sighted person will use.
Yeah, exactly. But you thought through the process as well. And so that's, whether you're sighted or not, that's important to use that as too. We can't rely on, compared to just sitting in a chair and flipping channels and watching TV and not doing anything else. There's lots of other things you can do.
Exactly. And one time I got frustrated with my computer at home, and I have a friend who is good in computers. He lives in Germany. So we were on the phone, and he didn't know how to help me because just wouldn't read everything in the screen. So based on the experience with my sister, I said, okay, let me turn the video on. I'm going to put the speaker. I'm going to point the screen. And he thought I was nuts, but then he got happy. It was cool.
Yeah.
My friend who I grew up with, and he's a computer engineering, he was telling me, okay, go to the right, keep moving the mouse to the right. Okay, click it there, and we did it.
That's amazing. Yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
Yes. That's really cool. Very cool. I am going to read your website and phone numbers again to our listeners if you're out there and you want more information about the Commission for the Blind. The full title is the Nebraska Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And if you do want more information, their website is www.ncbvi.nebraska.gov. And the Lincoln number, which would be long distance from outside Lincoln, but in Lincoln is 402-471-2891, or their 800 number is 1-877-809-2419. And if you didn't get a chance to get those numbers down and you want them later please call the Radio Talking Book Service office, and we will share that information with you again. And our number is 402-572-3003. So, Carlos, I would like to thank you very much, and publicly to our listeners, I'd like to thank Carlos and the Commission for the Blind for all the referring that they do for our listeners and for us. We often will get an application that comes through them for a radio from anywhere across the state, and we very much appreciate that, and we appreciate working with you and the folks in Lincoln and the folks all across the state. And I'll give a shout-out to Glenn Irvin, because he's doing fabulous things in Norfolk as far as getting radios out to folks in that area, and we're looking forward to maybe being able to do more of that across the state as well. So, Carlos, thank you very much for coming in. Any final thoughts you have for our listeners?
No, just thank you for inviting me. I know I cannot explain everything the agency does for blind people in general in 1 hour, but I hope I was able to give you an idea. One of the areas I didn't talk about was our transition program, but in general, we provide services to all ages. It doesn't matter how old a person is. Okay?
Okay, that's very good. And for more information, go to their website or reach out, call that number, or call us, and we can put you in touch with them. So we hope our listeners have a wonderful rest of the day and have a wonderful weekend. And thank you from Radio Talking Book Service.